Evening, everybody. I'm here today. Did y'all miss me? I have slept for 2 days, on and off. I was tired. I didn't realize how tired I was. The Lord told me you need to get some rest. So I've been spending some time with the Lord, and I've been resting it, but back and forth at the same time. So I just I've been sleeping so much. The only time that was awake is when I was praying or reading the Bible, and then I'd go right back to sleep. So I got some rest. I need some more. Still tired. Anyway, today I was I read the whole book of Hebrews. Um, I've read it a few times, but sometimes I don't know what it is about the book. It's one of those books that um, sometimes that it just strikes me I need to read it, and I read the whole thing, and it helps. It really does. So, but since I read it, I figured I might as well do a message on it tonight. So that's what I'm doing. And the thing about this, tonight's message is on Hebrews, and it is called the title is called Christ the Better Covenant, comparing angels, priest, and faith in Hebrews. The thing about Hebrews is, it's attributed that the author of Hebrews, some people, say it's Paul, but actually they say that the main consensus is that the author's unknown. There are people who attribute it to Paul, but there's so much that doesn't fit that Paul wrote it. So they have other authors in mind that it may be, but the author of this book is unknown because it doesn't state who the author is. Paul started most of his letters and things, with these salutations and greetings that were, there's signatures, there's marks of who the author was, of how they wrote, and so because of that, Hebrews is different than any of the other books. So they can't figure out who the author is, and it doesn't specifically say. So even though some say Paul's, there's a lot that says that possibly it's not Paul. Some people attribute it to Apollos, that maybe Apollos wrote it. But that goes. If Paul wrote it, why didn't he say that? In my opinion, Apollos was a very learned man. He was just like Paul, and Paul specifically stated he was the author. Why didn't Paul specifically state he was the author? And judging by some of the other things about Apollos, it looks like he would have said, I wrote this. I don't know, but he would have wanted to take credit. Some people think it may be Barnabas that wrote this letter. Barnabas, because Barnabas was under Paul, and it sounds kind of like Paul. So he was a student of Paul. So maybe Barnabas wrote it. But there's another interpretation of who wrote this letter, and that is that Priscilla wrote this letter, because in that day and age, and that the fact that the idea that Priscilla wrote this letter, and this is my favorite interpretation, because I happen to believe that maybe Priscilla wrote this letter too, is that it doesn't attribute an author. And in that day of time, you know, a woman writing couldn't very well put her signature on what she wrote. This has been true throughout history. Women used to write books, and they would have to write them anonymously or under a pen name that was a man's pen name. So, I lean more toward that interpretation, but that's my own thoughts. So, there's no definitive answer of who, as far as studying theology, there's no consensus on who wrote this letter. The consensus is it's an unknown author. So, anyway, or wrote this book, Hebrews, that it's an unknown author. So, anyway, to the lesson. That was a little tidbit I just wanted to share with y'all. So the book of Hebrews, pretty much argues for this this absolute supremacy of Jesus Christ as the New Testament over every aspect of the Old Testament system, or the Old Covenant system. It's a new covenant of the Old Testament covenant, same thing. And it's achieved. This is achieved by systematically contrasting Christ with certain elements of the past. These elements include angels and some other aspects. So the main thing we're going to go, the first part of it is this contrast of angels. I'm talking about there's two mentions in this book, and the first part is about angels and how that relates how Jesus is above the angels and he's superior to angels. But it talks about the role of angels as ministering spirits. In Job, it tells us that the angel, like it calls the angels morning stars. Job said that in the beginning that all the morning stars sang together, and Jesus in Revelation refers to himself as the bright and morning star, and this is establishing that he is the sun and the air. He's angels are servants. They're just merely servants, and their purpose. They were created as subordinates, and they had this functional role, which was to minister to the heirs of salvation. It says in this this book. So they're subordinate to Jesus. Jesus is the main heir. So, and that's why he refers to himself as the bright and morning star. So he is above the angels. So, as I said, according to Hebrews, the angels are spiritual beings that were sent out to do for service, which minister. That's where we get this word. There's this Greek word called liturgy. I can't say it, but it's where we get the word liturgy from, and which means ministering, which means to be a minister, to be a minister, and so the angels' function was to be of service, and they don't rule over anything. They're servants, just like we're servants. Um, but of course, Christ, he's the Son, so he's seated at the right hand of God, and he actually has authority to rule. Um, and as I said, it tells that the angels are dispatched as for the sake of those who inherit salvation, which that means they're actually they're servants of Christ that are dispatched to be our servants. They are to support the supportive role to those who inherit salvation. So if we are servants of Christ, the angels are to support us in our service. They have a supportive role to those who inherit salvation. So that's their entire mission is that is centered on the well-being of redeemed humanity. Those of us who are redeemed, that they're here to serve us, and they have um, that so if you look at it in higher order, it is Christ, and then it is the redeemed, and then it is the angels are supportive to us. So, but we are commanded, as Hebrews 13 tells us, that it talks about these entertaining. You ever heard this phrase with the entertaining angels unawares? So this is a command that we're supposed to part of our Christian walk, our Christian service. We're supposed to extend hospitality to anyone, to people. So this is should be always be motivated by the fact that not only are we serving people because God told us to love each other and love our brethren and love our neighbor, but we never know who we're serving. We never know who is put in our path, if it's our neighbor or if it's an angel. And it says it's an angel. You may entertain angels unaware. As we see this, Abraham and Lot both were met by angels. That Abraham, they extended hospitality to these angels, and that's why God says that is that they take human form. This shows that they take human form. I mean, we look for angels when we think, hey, they're gonna look like the images and the pictures and things that we see, the artistic interpretations of these angelic beings with wings, or that we're going to see these things with wheels with eyes all around, and I mean all these different things that we think we're going to see when we see an angel. But angels can take human form, just like Jesus took a form that was not his own when he was on that road to Emmaus with the disciples, and they didn't even know it was Jesus that they were talking to until he revealed himself to them. Angels can do the same. They can appear to us as human beings, to give us messages and things. So we never know who we're coming in contact with, because that's how God tests us. That's one of the tests. When we fail the test of hospitality, we commit the sin of Sodom. So, I mean, you like somebody comes up to you and they say, "I'm hungry," and you don't feed them. It could be an angel. It could be Jesus himself. That's why he said, um, he talked about, doing to these, doing the things that you could very well be doing, uh, it to him, whatever you do. So anyway, okay, back to this, idea of talking about, and Job, when it talks about angels being morning stars, um, this describes them as these celestial beings who were part of the created order. They were in the beginning. They were there in the beginning, and they sang together. And it parallels this with the sons of God. And they were witnesses to creation, but not they didn't have anything to do with creating creation, but they were witnesses to it. And but Jesus, by contrast, is the one whom the universe, through whom the universe was made. Um, God is creator, but Jesus, it says everything that was made was made by, in, and through him, Jesus. So he's not, um, he's not a, he was not, the angels are created beings just like we are. But their primary role from the beginning was to be worshipers and to worship. So, they worshiped, and they rejoiced when the world was made. And so they provided this praise to God. But Jesus is the one whom they worship. And, so this makes him the object of worship. He's not just a part of the heavenly host of earth. He's not just another angel. He is above the angels. It says that he was made a little better than he's made above the angels. Um, so he is the heir. He is above them. So this theme of Christ's superiority culminates in, uh, this in the New Testament with this title that he gives for himself. He gives himself this title, which it includes and transcends all previous imagery of light and glory when he calls himself the bright and morning star in Revelation 22:16. And this title signifies that he is the ultimate unparalleled source of divine light. He is the herald of the eternal day that ends the night of sin and the shadows of the old covenant. If angels are a group of shining stars that witness the dawn, then Jesus is the brilliant light of the dawn itself. His appearance makes all other lesser lights, like the old covenant system, obsolete. This title grounds his cosmic identity in the specific historical and prophetic fulfillment of his role and his messianic claim. He is not merely a spiritual being like an angel, but the promised perfect king who established a better covenant based on superior promises. So, the next part of Hebrews that talks about, shows his superiority, is that when it talks about the priesthood and how he is a more perfect priest than the original priesthood. So his has this. It talks about this eternal priesthood of Jesus Christ, and this book dedicates the several chapters to establishing this ultimate superiority through his role as this eternal high priest. And this is another foundation for declaring that the new covenant was better than the old. The author's argument is that Jesus' priesthood operates according to this order of Melchizedek rather than the Levitical order of Aaron. So therefore it makes it this perfect, this eternal, perfect, and final priesthood. The author first acknowledges the necessity and the function of the Old Testament priesthood, but highlights its inherent limitations. The Levitical priests were chosen from among men to mediate between God and humanity, and were required to sympathize with people's weaknesses. But these priests were themselves sinful, and therefore had to offer sacrifices not only for their own sins, but they had to offer the sacrifice for their own sins before they could offer them for other people. So this need for repeated offering proved the sacrifices were imperfect and temporary. And so the priests were, even though the priests were moral, they constantly died and had to be replaced, meaning their ministry was constantly interrupted and ultimately incomplete. And so this system could never achieve a full final redemption. It had to keep going over and repeating over and over and over again because of it was imperfect. And so to establish Jesus' eternal credentials, the author pivots to this figure of Melchizedek from Genesis 14. Melchizedek was a king of Salem, which he talks about, says the king of peace. Which, as we know, Jesus is also called the Prince of Peace. So, and he was a priest of the God Most High, and he existed before the Mosaic Law. This was a priest before the Mosaic Law. The Levitical priesthood was a priesthood that was established through the Mosaic Law, but Melchizedek was a priest that existed before the Mosaic Law was established. It was a previous priesthood that existed before the law. So the law made it necessary for the Levitical priesthood to offer these sacrifices over and over and over and over again. But Melchizedek's priesthood, the order which Melchizedek came from, existed before that law was established. So therefore, the order that Jesus came from was from the order that came before the law. So this Abraham was the ancestor of the Levites, and he paid tithes to Melchizedek. So Melchizedek had a superior rank than to Abraham. He was a high priest that Abraham had paid tithes to Melchizedek. Well, the Levites and the Levitical priesthood came from Abraham, so they were a lesser order than Melchizedek's order. So the author argues that Psalm 110:4 prophesied the Messiah would be a priest forever in the order of Melchizedek. So Jesus fulfills this prophecy, establishing a priesthood not based on earthly lineage or temporary laws, but on the power of an indestructible life. So Jesus' role as the Melchizedekian priest resolves every weakness found in the Levitical system. Unlike the priests who were mortal and often replaced, Jesus is eternal and holds the priesthood permanently because he lives forever to intercede for believers. While the Levitical priests were sinful, Jesus is sinless, holy, innocent, and unsustained, meaning he never needed to offer a sacrifice for his own failures. Furthermore, his ministry is conducted in the true heavenly sanctuary, not the earthly temple, which was merely a copy or shadow. That's what it says about the tabernacle and then the permanent structure of the temple that was built, Solomon's temple. These sacrifices had to be offered in them. They were both temporary temples. Jesus became the temple, and he is the more perfect temple. He established a more perfect covenant. He is also the more perfect temple, the temple that was not made by human hands, and a temple that will live forever, that will never be destroyed. It can never be replaced. The other temples, the tabernacle was a tent. So was the physical structure of the temple that was built. It was a temporary structure. It was the same as the tent. They were copies, they were shadows of the perfect. There's a verse that says, when the more perfect has come. Those things are done away with when the more perfect has come. So he's not pictured as standing daily ministering, but seated at the right hand of God, signifying his completed work. He was able to sit down at the right hand of God instead of stand and minister and offer sacrifices daily as the priest did. His work was complete, so he was able to sit down at the right hand of God. So the perfection of the priest leads directly to the perfection of the sacrifice. While the blood of bulls and goats could only temporarily cover sins and required endless repetition, Jesus entered the heavenly sanctuary once and for all with his own perfect blood, securing eternal redemption for all who believe. This once-for-all sacrifice is the ultimate contrast to the Old Covenant's endless rituals, because this perfect priest has inaugurated a new covenant and opened a new and living way into God's presence. Believers are urged to draw near with a true heart and full assurance of faith into the heavenly Holy of Holies. The entire argument aims to convince the readers that to abandon this perfect high priest is to abandon the greatest spiritual reality ever offered by God. So, this is showing that that anything that you're holding to imperfection, if you're holding to or looking at anything that is part of the old covenant, that you're holding to the imperfect copy shadow of the perfect thing that's already come under the new covenant. Why would you hold to the imperfect when the perfect has come? Then the next part we're going to look at in Hebrews is where the author goes through this what's called the Hall of Faith, and this shifts away from this main argument of letter of his superiority to how this is the motivation for the proof and motivation for that we have through that through this realization of cross superiority through this new covenant. After establishing the finality of Christ's sacrifice and the danger of talking about apostasy, which is falling away from thinking that you have to go back to the old ways when you already have the perfect sacrifice has already been made, and the new covenant is established, and there's no more need for the shedding of blood to go back to the old way and continue that. That's a form of apostasy. That's a falling away from the true faith that Christ is superior to the old. So, after that's that warning of the apostasy. Don't go back to the old way. Stay with the perfect. Don't go back to the imperfect. The author provides this long catalog of the Old Testament figures who successfully lived by faith, urging the readers to emulate their endurance. So it's saying, don't go back to the old way. Continue in the new covenant, and continue with faith in this superiority of Christ in this new covenant. Continue through faith, endure the faith in what you know to be the truth. So, it starts in Hebrews 11 with it opens with this the verse that says, faith is the assurance of things hoped for and the conviction of things not seen. So, this definition highlights two aspects. It says substance and assurance. Faith gives substance and reality to things that are currently only hoped for, which is the heavenly city. This is the kingdom. And conviction, which is faith. Faith provides the evidence or proof for the reality of things that are invisible. That's the conviction that we know this to be true. That God is the creator of the universe. We know God's creator of the universe, and we know that Christ is the author and finisher of our faith. That is the perfect covenant. He's the perfect sacrifice, and He is the establishment of the new covenant. So, they go through this whole list of these early heroes that illustrate faith as both obedience to God's specific commands and seeking a greater unseen homeland. That's pretty much what it's telling us, that we're looking forward to the kingdom, our new home. So, it goes through, Abel, Enoch, and Noah. It tells about these figures show faith in the pre-flood world. Abel's faith was seen in his superior sacrifice, offering the best of what he had, by which he was commended as righteous. Enoch's faith was marked by a life that pleased God, resulting in him being taken away without seeing death. And Noah's faith was his obedience to a divine warning about the flood, an event as yet unseen, which led him to build the ark and to save his family. And then Abraham and the patriarchs. Abraham is the primary example of faith as a journey and endurance. His faith was his obedience to leave his homeland, not knowing where he was going. He, his wife Sarah, and his descendants, Isaac and Jacob, all lived as sojourners and strangers dwelling in tents. And they did this because they were looking forward to the city that has foundations, whose designer and builder is God. Faith enables a person to live for future, heavenly reward rather than present earthly comfort. And then it talks about faith in deliverance, or as Moses represents faith demonstrated through courageous decisions and trusting God's power over human authority. Moses, by faith, refused the privileges of royalty, choosing instead to endure ill treatment with the people of God, and considered the reproach of Christ greater riches than treasures of Egypt. He acted as seeing him who is unseen. Moses made a choice to walk by faith, not by sight. His faith enabled him to lead the Passover, protecting his people from the destroyer and the crossing of the Red Sea. And then it talks about Rahab, the inclusion of Rahab and the prostitute. Rahab the prostitute highlights that faith is available to anyone regardless of background. She acted by faith in welcoming the Israelite spies, showing the priority of trusting God's people over her own city's government. And the chapter concludes by rapidly listing heroes, demonstrating that true faith manifests both in miraculous victories and patient suffering. Um, it goes on to say that some through faith conquered kingdoms, shut the mouths of lions, this is Daniel, quenched the power of fire, and obtained great promises. Others suffered mocking and scourging, were imprisoned, stoned, sawed in two, and were killed by the sword. They wandered in destitution and ill treatment, people of whom the world was not worthy. The final section draws a crucial conclusion. All these people, though commended for their faith, did not receive what was fully promised, the perfection of the new covenant, because it was all before Jesus. Jesus is the perfection of the new covenant. The promise, that's one way it says we receive a greater portion of the inheritance, because that which is perfect has already come. So God had provided something better for us, the fulfillment in Christ, so that they, the Old Testament saints, would not be made perfect apart from us. This powerfully motivates us to endure, because we live in the age of fulfillment, surrounded by a vast cloud of witnesses who endured far worse for a lesser promise. As I said, we receive a greater portion, and we should be thankful for that. We're closer to seeing the fulfillment of the promises than they were. The New Testament saints, Paul and those like him, they were able to see, they got to witness the perfection of the new covenant established. And we're closer to the coming of the kingdom, which is the ultimate fulfillment of that promise. So we have more to look forward to than they did. We're closer. We're closer to the finish line. They are, to look back at what they endured, even though they were further away, even though much of the promise they hadn't seen as much as what the New Testament saints had seen. They hadn't seen as much as what we have seen. They endured through what they endured through, so that should motivate us to endure all the more, because we're closer. Anyway. I hope y'all enjoyed tonight's message. I mean, I just shared with y'all what I read today and my thoughts on what came out of my study. So I love y'all, and I will see y'all tomorrow, I guess.